Thomas Griggs. Whatever the question, the answer is community, now more than ever. So Thomas graduated from Duke University, where he spent 2 years studying ethics, world religions, symbolic communication, and Jungian psychology, followed by a study in the Divinity School. His first master's degree in psychotherapy and social change led to licensure as a marriage, family, and child therapist, especially in transformational group psychotherapy. He earned his second master's and doctorate in clinical psychology from Palo Alto University. After working at the interface of clinical psychology and psychic emergency in both inpatient and outpatient settings, he helped to launch the Association of Psychic Practitioners in Northern California in 1983. Since 1993, he's been an active member of the Mankind Project USA, becoming a declared elder in 2019. After calling North Carolina his home for more than 4 decades, he returned to the West Coast in 2020 to be near his daughter and grandchildren in Seattle. So with that, thank you so much, Thomas, for presenting to us this morning.
Thank you. I'm going to go back and forth between sharing my screen and making a few comments, if I can. And so I want to open with a quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer, whom I know a lot of you know from her first book, Braiding Sweetgrass. Her second book, The Serviceberry Abundance and Reciprocity in the Natural World, has this particular passage in it. Anthropologists who study gift economies note that they function well in small, tightly knit communities. You might rightly observe that we no longer live in small, close-knit societies where generosity and mutual esteem structure our relations. But we could. It is within our power to create such webs of interdependence, quite outside the market economy. Maybe that is how we extract ourselves from a cannibal economy. Intentional communities of mutual self-reliance and reciprocity are the wave of the future, and their currency is sharing. The move toward a local food economy is not just about freshness and food miles and carbon footprints and soil organic matter. It is about all of those things, but it's also about the deep human desire for connection, for honor, to be in reciprocity with the gifts that are given you. So from my point of view, there is an intersection of intentional community and preparation for the future in a particularly challenging world, increasingly challenging world. That's what whatever the question, the answer is community means. And now that's what now more than ever means. So if the simplest definition of an intentional community is a group of people who have chosen to live together or share resources on the basis of common values, or both. So an intentional community may be people who live together, or it may be people who don't, but share values and share resources. Both of those models are in the communities that I'm familiar with from the intentional community movement. So this is not an academic presentation. It's my personal experience, and it's in response to people asking. When we were at Harvey's, I think 3 different people asked me to tell them more about where I had moved to on September the 1st. And that's Sangaya co-housing community. And so rather than try to repeat myself 3 times individually. We thought we'd open it up to the whole group today. Now, the heart of the matter is that in an intentional community, there are shared values. I should point out that in both of the co-housing communities that I've lived in, one in North Carolina and one here in north of Seattle, the values of those communities are posted, and people do talk about them and strive to live them, but there is no requirement to pledge to those values. It's by attraction rather than promotion. That if people like these ideas and they want to hang out with people who believe these things, then it's a good place to be. And it's just assumed that we are all striving in the same direction, but there's no policing of those values, as it were. My experience in shared living has, I think, started when I was in graduate school, my first master's. A group of us grad students got a house together, and that was a semi-intentional community. We shared a lot of values, but none of that was really explicit. We were just grad students. And it was one of the best experiences of my life. I absolutely loved it. We shared responsibilities, and I felt more nurtured there than I probably ever had anywhere else in my life. When I moved out to, well, I spent a year in the Westwood co-housing community in Asheville, North Carolina, in the mountains, and was bitten by the bug once again. I'd known about intentional communities my whole life, but I hadn't actually been full-time living in one until I got there to Asheville. And I completely fell in love with it all over again. So, for reasons which I'll explain in a minute. And then, so when I moved out here to Seattle, first thing I did was I started to nose around, look for a place to live. But I knew I was going to take a while to find out my eventual landing place. And so I got a room in a house, and it was a shared living arrangement, but that was not intentional. And we weren't sharing resources, and we didn't have any explicit shared value intentions. It was a relatively positive experience, but it wasn't an intentional community. It was just logistics, shared logistics. Then September 1st, when I moved into Songaya, my world kind of exploded in this way. I am still on the board of the Northwest Intentional Community Association. I have been for the past 3.5 years. And we host gatherings of people who are interested in intentional community. We've put on probably 4 or 5 at different times. Some are one day, some are multiple day. And so I've been immersed in the conversation about not only why people want intentional community, but also what all the different forms are that intentional communities take. And we'll give a quick overview on that. One of the most common questions is, how do I get involved? And there's a lot of ways to get involved. Some of them require buying in an equity position in a house, in a co-housing project, and owning the property, and others don't. You can rent as a way of getting into the community. And both communities that I've been involved with have a provision for people to be active in the community but not live there. So they're what are called associates, and there are quite a few of those here at Songaya. There might be 40 people that are actually on site, and then there's at least another 50 who are off site living in the metro area and have more or less of a connection with our community. And there's constantly events are happening that make it possible for people to be more or less involved with the community out here. So just a quick word about co-housing, both Westwood in Asheville and Sangaya here in Seattle have a 25 to 30-year history. They were conceived at least 25 years ago, and both were designed around a common, um, uh, on a plot of land that was specifically utilized for the purpose of sharing space and sharing resources. So both of them have a major common house where there's a commercial kitchen and a big meeting room where all kinds of things take place, including communal meals. Both have extensive, massive community gardens. Both have workshops that are extensive, woodworking and otherwise metalworking and otherwise all the tools you could possibly want to fix things. Um, and that's one of the places that I plug in and really enjoy spending my time. Uh, they so in both cases they were designed to have small units that were residential that people could own, but they come together for and share resources in the common areas. And so the common house is the central gathering place for both of these communities. Not all intentional communities have a common house, but it's for those that were designed with this ethic in mind, most of them do for kind of obvious reasons. Um, a difference between Asheville and Seattle, in my experience, is that both have massive gardens, but what Seattle has that's unique is a garden to table club where I pay a couple $100 a month and get 5 prepared meals a week, 4 dinners and a breakfast. And then there's this massive pantry uh, with all these freezers and coolers and shelves that I can just go in and pick up any groceries I want out of the pantry and take them back to where I live and cook my own food in between the times that we're producing these shared meals in the common house. So Monday through Thursday, we have dinner together. Uh, and that uh, didn't exist in Westwood. We had a lot of potluck dinners and community events in Westwood, but we didn't have 5 planned meals a week. Um, Another thing that's a little bit different here at Sangaya, there's an original 12-acre plot of land where the original designed 13 units were built. The small units around the common house and around the common land. But then over time, they have acquired 5 different properties that are immediately adjacent to the original 12 acres. And some of those are houses that people bought and live in and share, and they're full-fledged members of the community. And some, like where I live, are actually houses that are adjacent to the property that were bought and then opened up for rental. So I can come in and rent a room in one of those houses. But we're actually in a suburban neighborhood that just happens to be immediately adjacent to the Sangaya campus, as it were. There are 150 trees on the Sangaya property. That we had a full-time arborist here who lived here, who recently moved out, who knows more about apples than anything I could ever dream to know about, and found it absolutely fascinating to learn about what it takes to nurture a crop like that. There's a native forest here that is created under a government grant that is informed by a licensed indigenous consultant who has certified that every one of the plants in the native forest is there because it has historic and cultural value. And so it's an educational forest. It's called a forest, but it starts out all as relatively small plants that then grow up in profusion. And that's one of 4 gardens here. There's another And that one's fascinating because it's got all the indigenous names alongside the um, um, botanical names, and it also some description of what those plants were used for traditionally, medicinally. And then there's another experimental forest that is planted in a completely different way to compare which methods of starting up gardens and then forests is most effective. So there's some studying that's always going on here. And then there's a produce garden, which is massive. And then there's an ornamental garden, which is also massive. So we're constantly swimming in flowers around here as well as food. And for me, it's fun. I get sent out to go harvest, an entire trash bag full of greens in order to prepare a meal. And I have great fun doing that. There's also here, there's goats and there's chickens and there's some wildlife that roams around, notably rabbits, which terrorize the garden. The goats are not for any kind of food products. They are little lawnmowers, and they're allocated around the property mainly in order to eat blackberries and try to keep control of all the brambles that are so wont to grow out here. The chickens, there's a rooster that I hear every morning out my window. And the chickens, of course, they don't lay enough eggs. There's probably 18 chickens there. They don't lay enough eggs to feed the entire community. So the people who care for the chickens are the ones that get to eat the eggs that are produced here. And I can say that my 5-year-old grandson loves to come visit here and go into the chicken coop and also go down and talk to the goats and pet them and stuff like that. So this is one of the joys of being here is it's become a destination for my family. It's for the grandchildren because there's a lot of things to do here that are of great interest to them, and including the 2-year-old, little Friday. She also loves coming here. Most recently, one of the events was an apple pressing. So folks harvested 250 pounds of apples from the trees, and we washed them, cut them up, put them through the crusher, all by hand, and then put them through the press and came out with lots and lots of apple juice. So we're swimming in applesauce and apple juice and apple pie filling and apple, compote and just anything you can think of with apples, we're doing it. And plus 3 refrigerators full of apples that you can just go anytime you want and grab one and. So that was a social event where we invited all the neighbors to come to the apple pressing, and a lot of associates came because everybody pitches in this kind of picnicky potluck way during the day of pressing apples. And that's an event that happens probably twice a year. So let me come back to some of what I said. I'd talk about some of the day-to-day components of the being in community and some of the benefits and some of the challenges. And then I might show you some websites that give you a broader perspective on the intentional community movement. But we'll see about that depending on the amount of time we have, because I want you to be able to ask questions that you have. So my day-to-day experience, like my responsibilities and my activities, I'm going to jump down here to the Songayan one because that's really much more complicated than the time at Westwood. I do spend time cooking in the kitchen and cleaning up. I do some harvesting. I work in the workshop, do maintenance repairs, like replacing doorknobs or fixing things that don't work. I'm on what's called the preparedness and resilience team because there's a very active group of people here who are interested in learning more about the Great Turning, aka the collapse of civilization, hospicing modernity. And so I'm leading that team, actually. And then I'm active in the Celebrants Committee. That's the group that creates rituals and ceremony and plans like a solstice gathering, a New Year's gathering, Indigenous Peoples Day, an alternative to Thanksgiving. And it's tending to the ritual and symbolic life of the community. That's what that's about. So we have campfires, we've had grief circles, and invented new holidays called hunkering, where people turn inward and hibernate for a week and turn off their phones and get renewed to come back out and encounter the world again. That's what hunkering means. We have all kinds of events here. At a drumming class, and this is just in the 3 months that I've been here. More things than I can remember or count. Robin Wall Kimmerer was here in Seattle and did a live cast from an auditorium downtown, and we live streamed it into our common house. And it was, I don't know, at least 25 people were there for that while she did a talk for about an hour and took questions. I've already mentioned the apple pressing. We have a Harvest Festival and a May Day Festival, various other things. You can read some of the rest of that. Notably, we sing at every gathering and every meal, always. Every meeting is open and closed with singing. And that Sangaya is on purpose, the name, and all the sub residential units all have song in their name. I live in a place called Puppy Song, for whatever that's worth. But singing is essential to this community. So I just received this yesterday from the co-founder, the last remaining co-founder of Sangaya. And she was writing, she sent this to me directly because it's part of her sort of her memoirs. As a culture, we've lost the power and energy of singing together. We leave singing to the composers and singers used as entertainment. As the intentional community of Sangaya, we have been singing together regularly for years, yet the pandemic interrupted that pattern. We are now relearning how to sing together songs that hold our identity, songs that heal, songs that bring laughter, tears, joy, and sadness. Singing becomes a means of expression from our hearts and souls as well as our voices. Then she adds, now as I listen to my aging voice, she's 85, it sounds raspy, and I ask often, am I on key? Does it matter? We can encourage ourselves to sing whether we think we can carry a tune or not. It can help us heal as we enter a time of collapse and deep structural brokenness, reminding us of our oneness and connections to all that is. And that gives you a little peek into something that's a bit unique about this particular place. Now, I can see we're not going to get to the websites unless you run out of questions. This is a list of just off the top of my head reasons I love living here. These are the benefits of living in intentional community. There aren't as many children here now as there were back in North Carolina. The children here have grown up and moved away. So there's only 3 or 4 children or youth still on the campus. But you all can read that clearly, right? You can see that screen easily enough. Okay. So I'm not gonna read through that, but you can see those are the benefits and the joys of being here. The one thing I would highlight is no matter what the need is, and this happens several times a day, people just post whatever they need and somebody in the community responds. They need a ride to the airport or to the hospital. They want to borrow a car. They need somebody to pick up something at the store. they, I posted, does anybody have a keyboard I could borrow for a while to take a piano lesson? Who knows where I can get my guitar repaired? Who's got a good recommendation for a pharmacist or a dentist? Uh, no matter what you could possibly need. Somebody found an object and didn't know what it was. They put up a picture and asked the community, what is this? Somebody saw an animal in the garden and got a picture of it and didn't know what the animal was. So it triggered a conversation in the whole community about what the animal was. Turns out it's a member of the weasel family called a stoat. And the stoats like to eat rabbits, which is cause for great celebration because nobody wants to persecute the cute little bunnies, but everybody wants to try to keep them out of the garden. So we even have I haven't been here before, but there's a ritual of chasing the rabbits out of the garden where everybody gets at one end and bangs pots and pans and tries to chase them out of the garden. It's a complete joke. Nobody believes it really works, but we do it anyway. And then in terms of challenges of intentional community, everyone that I've ever heard of always has differences in personalities. There's always interpersonal conflict of some kind that people struggle with. And so they all want skills about how to deal with conflict. It's very common to have nonviolent communication and restorative justice circles trained and active in an intentional community. That's historically, though, they go together like hand in glove. Many of these communities employ a sociocracy and full or modified consensus process for decision making. And those, it's challenging. You have to be patient to work things through to consensus. And some people can drive you up a wall with their tangential, time-consuming soliloquies when the whole group is trying to get to a decision, and you can feel like it goes on forever. And that's just routine. All the communities say the same thing about that. Achieving the desired diversity on age or color, ethnicity, social location, making intentional community available to people that don't have capital is a very common conversation. And so people are trying to figure out how to do that. Whatever the wider culture is dealing with, an aging population, aging in place, all the general cultural concerns in the United States, they're all part of the regular challenges of an intentional community. Let me pause there. I do have an international map of intentional communities that shows how they appear all across the globe. I've got some statements about why intentional community is important. I've got examples of co-housing communities and a list of criteria that help match people up to find the kind of community that they need and want. And I've also got a slideshow of photos about the place where I live. But let's pause there and throw it open. You can stick your hand up if you've got a question or a comment. Michael, go ahead. Take yourself off mute.
I'll just say your presentation affected me very deeply, just because I'll just say my grandfather was born in 1877, and he lived to almost 100 years, and he was the son of Mormon pioneers. And the life they lived was very similar to the one you portray. Even though it was religiously based, it still was a community, highly interdependent, very built along the lines you are describing. And I experienced some of it as a child when we went to Utah, when they lived in a house built by Mormon pioneers, and we had it irrigation ditches timed exactly to the moment when you could collect your water, and you had all these the social integrations and everything about it. And I saw it. It was like, and the thing I wanted to ask you, just distilling it to the moment, is there's a quality of what you're talking about that is almost like a wish to leave the 21st century. There's a time warp element here because that's what I always felt as a kid is that when we went to Utah, to Provo, to see my relatives, I felt like I was consciously leaving the world. I was consciously leaving this world and a lot of things in my California life behind, and that was what was happening. I could feel it even then. And I'm wondering if that's part of what the appeal is for you. That's all.
I'd say yes, Michael, but it's not a nostalgic return to the past. It's definitely a move towards simplicity and cooperative living. And it's definitely preparation for a transformation in society where people need to be much, much more self reliant, that the systems of civilization are not going to be operating the way they've been. So it does look a lot like that. I think almost daily that the Amish had it right all along.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a return to the past so much as it is being informed by those who've lived that way and now seeking to establish cooperative communities. And there are these things called transition towns all across the globe where people, and it's a movement that started in the UK, and they are municipalities that specifically embrace these values and cooperative living and local economies. They may create their own currencies. They take responsibility for their own healthcare and their own communication systems, their own mail, and their own well-being. And they're wonderful stories that exist. They're burgeoning around the globe. That's the way I think about it. But you're
Okay.
right that it has that similarity. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Patricia, I saw your hand next, and then Mary Grace or Sam.
Yes, I'm wondering, can one rent for a month to test if one is a good fit? I can really appreciate can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can really appreciate the benefits, but I wonder if I will be able to take the challenges. So is it possible? Yeah, I mean, I'm a very idealistic, but perhaps in everyday life, I won't be able to take it. Is it possible to have a short-term rental to test it, or?
Well, there are so many different intentional communities that, and there are a lot of different possibilities of some of them do allow visitors. You don't necessarily have to live there to get a feel for whether or not it would work. But I'm laughing because that is the single most common response I get is people worried or anxious that they wouldn't be able to do it. Uh, and for different reasons. One common one is I don't know if I could give up my privacy, is probably the most common thing people think. They think that they'll lose their independence or their privacy and they'll be somehow forced into cooperative contact with other humans. It's not really true. I mean, everybody sets their own rhythm of engagement. And so, yes, there are places that you can visit. And I can give you I'll stick it
Thank you.
in the chat.
I love the concept of community. Yeah, but I wanted to know about the balance of having alone time as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, it would take a while to
Thank you.
figure that out. There we go. So it's ic.org. It is the website for the Foundation for Intentional Community. And that's a global resource, but most of the listings are in the United States. If you go there, you can get a pretty good sense of what some of the choices are. And they're pretty detailed. They actually list who is open to visitors and who isn't, who has openings and who doesn't, who's looking to form a community that doesn't yet exist. They're all part of the conversation.
Thank you.
MG?
You know, this is a really wonderful presentation. I mean, you do such a wonderful job every time you present. I always look forward to it. So I wanted to acknowledge that first.
Thank you.
And you know, it's so interesting. You know, I'm involved in quite a large community of people. And boy, I hear conversation about, gosh, what are we going to do in a few years? Don't we want to live together? And how would we do that? And kind of what you're describing, I imagine that there's all different forms of the intentional community. And the other thought I had was, and I don't know the practicalities of all that, but there's so many increasing unhoused people of how perhaps communities are going to be one way forward, you know, to change that. So I just really appreciate the whole topic.
And I had a question. You know, many people move into retirement villages, which have different levels of care as one gets near the end. How is that taken care of? Probably not at all, but I wanted to ask that question, Tom. How's it taken care of in an intentional community?
Well, here at Sangaya, there is a committee. It's called the Aging in Place Committee. And they are looking at all the permutations of that challenge. Every individual case is different. Part of it is a function of whether somebody has existing family nearby. Some of it's a function of whether they're an owner or renter. It's partly a function of what medical conditions they have. Some people live out their entire life here and are composted here. And, you know, there's a tree planted on top of them.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And now, of
Great.
course,
Love it.
you can actually buy a mushroom suit to aid in the composting of your body if you want to transition.
I
One of
love
the
it.
cool things about being in a place like this is there's so much more information
Yeah.
about possibilities. And it's right at your fingertips all day long,
Yeah.
at every meal. So, yeah, I don't have a snappy answer to that, but
Yes.
I can say, given the age wave in this country, it's a very big issue about and it's not just in intentional communities. Are there enough young people coming along behind the old people
Yep.
to take care of the old people?
Yep.
And it's a big issue. Like for us, it's, do we have enough people to actually do the harvest in the garden? And each year, you know, somebody finds it a little more difficult to put in as many hours as they did last year.
Mhm.
You know, if they're 85 years old, they're saying, I'm not doing any more gardening now. Sorry, I'd love to, but I can't.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Thank you. That's
yeah,
helpful.
the important thing is there's a whole group of people who are cooperatively working on answering the question.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd say. Eugenia.
I want to second what Mary Grace said. Gosh, this is just fascinating, and you do such a comprehensive job presenting it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my question, I had looked into a co-op housing place that was starting in Grass Valley in Northern California a number of years ago. And one of the things that I didn't like, and I'm just curious if this is across the board in your experience, you could not have visitors for very long. There was a specified time frame that because so I've had friends who have lost their homes and have needed a place to hang out for a couple months or something, and I think it was like a couple days you could have. And I would assume, I don't know if that's different across each place. Um, Another thing, are you allowed personal animals like dogs? Because
Like what?
I dogs,
Oh,
dogs.
dogs. Okay.
thoughts. And yeah. And like I saw in the list of things that you're doing, you have such a strong background in so many um skilled, talented fields. You're a valuable member. What if someone doesn't have valuable skills? Do you have to be voted in? How, do you apply? And then how are decisions made about who is allowed in? And I recognize that you're saying, first of all, it depends on vacancies and what's available. Um, so, do you have to have special talents? So how do you know if you're a good fit?
Okay, great. Excellent questions. Um, First, guests. Well, first of all, there are so many different intentional communities out there. You're going to get a lot of different answers to this. I
Okay.
can just tell you that this particular one, which is probably somewhat representative, but you could find alternatives easily. As far as guests goes, the way it works here is most of the common house co-housing places are built with guest rooms built into the common house. So
Oh,
you simply sign up, first come, first serve. I'm having my sister's coming to town and she's going to be here for 3 weeks. So I sign up and on the calendar and so she can stay in the guest room for maybe 3 weeks. So it's a supply demand question.
okay.
And if uh, it's understood that you want to keep the guest rooms available for other people, you don't, hog them. But then a lot of times people will allow house sitters or they'll have an extra room in their house and they'll contribute that to the pool if you need to have guests stay a little longer. That's how it works here.
Okay.
There is a rule here of no dogs. There are cats around. Um, Pets tend to be, particularly dogs, tend to be one of the highest conflict elements in a cooperative community. Now, having said that, there are plenty of cooperative communities that are based around animals, and you can bring all the animals you can find. You know, so it just depends on what you're trying to manage um, in the community. So there aren't any dogs here, but there are cats. Um, they're generally supposed to stay indoors because people don't want them hunting the birds, typically. Um,
Mm.
in terms of admissions, uh, the way it works here is you get to know the community, you come to events, and you attend a whole series of events over a period of time. There's a protocol that the community gets to know you by virtue of your attendance and participation at these community events. And you go to meals and you can show up at meetings and you can volunteer on some of the committees. Um, and so people get a feel for who you are. There are no criteria that are published that you have to meet, but the entire community does vote on whether they want to accept you as an associate member. And then that's a separate decision from whether or not you can actually get a physical space, because the physical space is controlled by different owners. It's not necessarily a community-wide decision. It may be just the landlord of that one unit that has a room available for rent, and it's up to the landlord or the people already living in that house if they will accept you. That was my case. I have a landlord, and so I had to interview with all of the people who already live here, and they had to sign off on me being acceptable. But they didn't put any effort into it, you know.
Um,
Thank you. That was fascinating. Thank you very much, Thomas.
there are 10 more minutes.
Okay, wow. Uh, any other questions right offhand? Carolyn, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving us this information and so colorfully with such texture. uh, I think you could go around and have an enormous career being a speaker just on this. Uh, here are some questions. you're renting a room, and you talked about you could cook whatever you want. Do you share a bathroom and a kitchen?
Well, yes, and that doesn't mean that that's true for everybody. That's just me. There are plenty of people that don't share a kitchen and don't share a bathroom uh, because they own their own unit, their own. All the units here happen to be duplexes, and so there's an upstairs, downstairs kind of thing. There's a lot of hills in Seattle, um, and yeah. So I do, but some people don't. The sharing.
It's just actually the house owners that have that convenience of their
No,
own.
no, there's a person who is a renter in a studio apartment that is downstairs on one of the units, and she has her own bathroom and her own kitchenette. It's like a one-room studio, and
Okay.
she's a renter. So there are a lot of different ways to get into Sangaya, and then there are a lot of different ways to get into other communities.
Okay. Speaking of these so many communities, and you spoke about uh, not only the foraging in the gardens, etc., as an activity, there also it doesn't mention like specifically discussion groups, but what I'm trying to say is are the communities of which you know and in your research, are they mostly for intellectuals, as you said, people who are looking for answers? I'm thinking about people who are not so educated.
Let me show you something, and then I'll come to you, Christine. Um, let's see. Can I get there this way? This is the website for the Foundation for Intentional Community. And let's see. Well, this is not what I was after. Well, yeah, here it is. You can sort of see it here. You see all the different variables. Um, some of these are rural, urban, suburban, small town, village, mobile, or to be determined. That's one variable about you could look at. Another is whether it's a commune organized around sharing almost everything. An eco village is organized around ecology and state sustainability. Now, these are going to pull for people that's what they're primarily interested in. And so, eco villages are not identical with co housing, but they have a lot of shared practices. So,
Uh-huh.
co housing is individual homes within a group owned property. Shared housing is multiple individuals sharing a dwelling. Then there's student housing, student co ops, spiritual religious communities, transition towns, I already mentioned, or eco neighborhoods, and traditional and indigenous communities. So, this is a pretty broad concept of intentional, what it takes to be intentional. Some of them are educationally based. Um, some of them are oriented toward diet. Some are oriented toward spiritual practice. Um, they have various ways of making decisions and handling their governance. Um, how much of their food do they produce? You see what the range of this is?
Yeah.
Okay, that it's how much tobacco to use or alcohol do you use? Is that an issue that would keep somebody in or out of a community? Healthcare styles, expected to share a common diet, open to members with pre-existing debt. Does it have a leader, an identified leader? Okay. So you get I think you get the idea.
And is this information, I'll just stop here. Thank you, Tommy.
Okay, you can go to the website and nose around and then get back to me with questions. Christine?
Yes, thank you. I love this topic. A few years ago, when I was thinking about what was the world needing, it was connection and community. And anyway, I have friends who have been in co-housing kind of situations, and it's always intrigued me. So I'm wondering about the who. I can imagine. I mean, I think all of us have had the conversations with people we love about, oh, let's go somewhere and find some paradise and live together, and all of that. My dad was thinking about that when I was little, also creating that with a cookhouse in the middle, in the center, and the different sub housing. So, what is the sense of younger people? Because as you're talking about, someone who gets to a certain age and wants to do this, and then they get to a certain age where they can't, be as actively involved. I mean, I could see this very much as a place where people would go later on in life after they've whatever. But are you seeing young people, just in terms of overall trends, are young people, I think with housing insecurity, this would be an amazing option for people. How is the word getting out, and what, I mean, what's the sense of the trends of this?
Well, yes, there's a tremendous interest in young people, and one of the reasons they're interested is ethical, a belief in the importance of community, especially in the future, and they want to live in that world, but also economically. It's shared expenses is one way to survive. So it's a very big deal. And I meet young people all the time through the Northwest Intentional Community Association that I'm on the board of, which is the Pacific Northwest. But FIC, the Foundation for Intentional Community, is nationwide. You can find lots and lots of young people either already in or looking for places in community without any problem at all. So it's by no means limited to elders.
What in your community at Sangaya, what's the demographic profile there?
Well, the average age here probably is more late 50, early 60s on average. The youngest member here is 5 years old. And there's a couple young teens who have not graduated from high school who are here. It's spread, but it's been around a long time, so it tilts toward the older folks.
Thank you.
Can I take one more from Mim, and then I think we probably have to stop.
Yeah.
Got about a minute.
Okay, mine's a simple question. Is it fic.org or .com, the website?
It's ic.org. I put it in the chat.
Oh, ic.org. Thank you.
Yeah, ic.org. That'll get you there.
Um,
You can say what you want to say.
Amen.
No, you can say what you want to say.
Well, I don't have a closing. I would encourage all of you to get up with me if you've got particular questions, but the website, both Sangaya and ic.org, I put them both in the chat. They're both very good resources that have lots of links to other information. So, I mean, you could spend an entire day just chasing down those leads. And don't focus too much on my individual circumstance, because there's so many different possibilities out there. You really have to match up your own circumstance and your own interest with the possibilities, and they're virtually infinite. So that's what I'd say in closing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you all for your attention and for your questions and for your support, your strokes.